looks like. Oh, yeah, we're on now. Okay, here we go. Turned it the wrong way. Good evening. Thank all of you for being here with us tonight. For those that are here with me in person, those of you who are watching us. What?
You dropped something.
I dropped something? Oh, thank you. Ugh. Just one of my notes. All right, thank you very much. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started as we go back to Romans chapter 12. We're going to pick back up. I appreciate you coming back after a 2-week break. But we're going to pick up where we left off our last time. So Romans chapter 12, beginning with verse 9. So anyway, as we're doing this now, let's open up with the word of prayer. Gracious, loving Heavenly Father, anoint us now with the power of your Holy Spirit as we come now to study your living, life-giving word. We thank you for this chance to be with you, to be here in your house, but also to be connected through the power of the internet and through this gift, dear God, that we can use it, dear God, to reach so many others. So thank you for bringing us all together at this time so that once again your word can come alive to us, but most importantly can give us the meat, the spiritual meat that we need for our lives to live for you each day. And as always, we ask this in your holy, your mighty, and your very precious name. Amen. All right, 2 weeks ago, we were together. We looked at verses 3 through 8 of chapter 12. You remember we studied, Paul is pointing out 2 ways how we are to live out the Christian life. First, it says to not think of yourself more highly than you ought to think or is necessary to think. And then secondly, he pointed out to think with sober judgment. Each according to the measure of faith that God has given to you. And what we talked about, Paul uses these 2 points to teach us about the importance of unity, especially within the life, the body of the church. And we focused on those words. You remember, measure of faith. And we talked about how our spiritual gifts come to us, not just through our measure of faith in God, but more importantly, this measure of faith that he's talking about, I believe it is God's measure of faith in us. The measure of faith God has in each of us. And because of this, we should never be jealous or resentful about the spiritual gifts that have been given to someone else. Because through God's faithfulness, he has given us our own spiritual gifts that he's entrusted to us. But most importantly, we then finish by pointing out that there are no small, unimportant, insignificant gifts. That there are some gifts that can be seen like huge or monumental spiritual gifts. But most gifts are just normal, everyday gifts that we are called to use within our lives and the life of the church. And we're to focus, if you remember, on how we are to use those gifts. If we're to have the gift of generosity, then give generously. If you have compassion, remember we talked about do it cheerfully, joyfully. Don't do it by saying, well, I'm only being compassionate to you because God says I've got to be compassionate to you. Well, now I want to pick up and look at verses 9 through 21. We might just start though with verse 19. So begin with verse 9. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Now, that's just going to stop there for this evening. Now, once again, we pick up, we'll look at verses 9, 10, 11, the first 3 verses in this section. Now, it's known as the marks of the true Christian, okay? And he opens up all this with a list of what we could call our guidelines or principles for a still call for us to live out the Christian life. You know, we talked about 2 weeks ago the first 2 points. Well, now he picks up a list of guidelines, principles. Now, in these verses, depending upon which Bible commentator that you read, some of these commentators have Paul's list containing of 10 guidelines, okay? One of them had 10 guidelines. Some of those commentators have 11 in their list. And they also had one that had the number list up to 12. But now, personally, I can count 13. I count 13 of these guidelines. So basically, besides how you put them together. But in looking at this list, what we first have to understand is the fact there's no specific order. There's no logical sequence or grouping to the guidelines within that opening list, verses 9 through 13, I should say. There in 9 through 13, there is no possible, specific list. This is not a list of step 1, followed by steps 2 through 10, or 11, 12, or 13, however you count them. And the reason why is that each individual guideline or principle listed here are, according to Paul, they're all necessary. All these things are needed to help us live out the Christian life. But the important thing within this list, 10 to 13 principles or guidelines, is that one, and only one of these principles listed here, is the key to really not just understanding, but living out these principles. So look again with me at verses 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. 9 through 13. Do a once over of that list. And as you're looking at that list with me, which one of these principles or guidelines do you believe that Paul would see as the key? Which one of these is the key to unlocking the other guidelines within our lives as a Christian? So do you see one in there that you think that Paul would see as the key?
Serve the Lord.
All right, that's a good one, but unfortunately that's not the one. And I'll be able to prove what I'm talking about.
Be kindly affectionated.
That's a good one, but that's not it either. And I'm not just saying this is what I think. I won't be able to prove it, okay?
Rejoicing in hope.
No, not that one either. The truth is, it's actually the first one found within the list.
Love is genuine.
All right, see, the New Revised Standard Version writes, or puts it, let love be genuine. The NIV has it, let love be sincere. But for us to truly understand it, and so I can tell you specifically that let love be genuine or sincere is the key. To understand what Paul is seeking to teach us here, we cannot look at this, especially that first guideline, from the English text point of view. We can't look at this from the English language point of view, okay? Now, in our English language here, in the English text, the guidelines listed are translated in what they call an imperative statements. Imperative statements. Now, if you like me, I had to look up what is an imperative statement. And I found out. An imperative statement is a statement or a sentence that gives a command or gives instructions to someone. Basically, an imperative statement is a statement or sentence that tells someone to either do something or how they are to do something, okay? Now, in the English text, they're always put as these statements of this is what you are to do, okay? How you are to do it. But in the Greek text, this is where we can begin to truly understand what it is that Paul is trying to tell us here. You see, in the Greek text, only that first one. Let love be genuine. Or let love be sincere. That's the only imperative statement. The rest of them, the remaining 2 to 10, 11, 12, 13, depending how you count them up, in the rest of the list, they're all used or written using what they call an adjective phrase or an adjective phrase. Okay? Now, once again, I know what an adjective is, I just didn't know what an adjective phrase is. So I had to look that up. See, an adjective phrase is a group of words that include an adjective that changes the noun or the pronoun that's being used. Now, I hope y'all remember this because it's going to be on the test after a while. You see, basically, here's what's going on here. Basically, what Paul does in the Greek text is to use the guideline of love as a command or as a statement of what we are called to do as Christians. But then what he does, in the Greek, he follows up all the remaining guidelines, the remainder of the list, by using the suffix ing at the end of all the other nouns, okay, or, the other words there. So enough of an English-Greek language lesson. What does all this mean? See, Paul is saying to us then, let your love be genuine. Let your love be sincere. And from this love, the results in your Christian life are then hating what is evil. This is what is in the Greek. Hating what is evil. Clinging to what is good. Devoting to one another in brotherly love. Honoring one another. Never lacking in zeal, serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope, enduring in affliction. Continuing in prayers. Sharing with believers of the saints in need. And then finally, practicing hospitality. So see, what Paul is saying is the imperative statement of what you're supposed to do is to love. And these are the results of what happens when you live out, specifically live out love. Okay? But here comes the catch, the catch to it all, if you want, however you want to put it. You see, to do this, there's a specific kind of love that Paul is actually telling us that we must have here, that we have to live out within our lives. Now, if any of you got a different word in that first part, let love be genuine or let love be sincere, has anybody got any a different kind of word there? Yes, what have you got?
Let love be without dissemination.
All right, dissemination, that's pretty good.
That's what I got.
Okay,
Dissimulation.
Huh?
Dissimulation.
Okay. See, what we need to understand, in that verse 9, that true, genuine love for Paul, in the Greek, what he actually writes is this: let love be unhypocritical. Or to put it simply, let your love be without hypocrisy. See, which means what? That to claim that you have a moral standard or belief, but your behavior, your lifestyle doesn't confirm or reflect what you believe. See, it's the old saying, there's the old thing about saying one thing, doing another. It's about telling everyone, I hate gossip. I despise gossip in any way, but then you're the one that runs around gossiping about telling gossip on everybody else. That's being a hypocrite. And Paul says that is not a love. Let love be unhypocritical. Or even better, the complete Jewish Bible. It translated like this: don't let love be a mere outward show. See, Paul is saying, don't let it be an outward show. Do not let your love be hypocritical where you say one thing, but then you do something else. Your love has to be genuine. And through genuine love, we then begin to live these things out. But see, for Paul, our love as Christians, it cannot be an outward show. And more importantly, it cannot be a selfish love. What is a selfish love? It's a love that seeks to get what? More for who?
You.
Yourself.
More for yourself than it is for other people. He says, instead, the person who lives out these principles within his or her life before others, that's the one who will be easily recognized. Not only living out genuine, sincere love, but see, more importantly, this is someone who lives out what kind of love, really? Whose kind of love? The love of God. This is the love of God. This is the love of Christ. So first off, for us to do this, to do these things, you do it with love. And with doing it in genuine, sincere, unhypocritical love, then these other things begin to fall in place in your life. But now, go to verses 14 through 19 that I read. Because it's in these verses here, even going into 21, now comes the really hard part, okay? Because so far, in chapter 12, going back to verse 1 and going then all the way through verse 3. Now, so far, Paul has been talking to the Christians there in Rome, giving them a specific setting in which Paul has been calling the Christians there to live out this guideline of love. You see, so far, this has been about living this love within the body of what? Within the organization of the what?
Church.
The church, the body of faith. See, so far this has all been about interacting with each other within the body of faith. But look at verse 14. You see, beginning in verse 14, Paul is now giving us what one commentator called the acid test. This is the acid test for living out this kind of genuine, sincere, unhypocritical love. Because it's at this point, Paul is now calling us to take this love where? We're to go what? Not just out into the world. Don't just take this love into the places that we work, we shop, we live. But greater than this, where is Paul really calling us to take this genuine, sincere, unhypocritical love? We're to take this love to those who would normally be considered to be our what?
Enemies.
Our enemies. Our adversaries. Basically, this is Paul calling us to take this love to those who will never do what? Who will never love us how? In return. Who are not going to love you back. And with all this, Paul is most important in calling us to put our what into love. We're to put action to our love, or to live out that how we say with God, love is not a noun, it's a verb. Love is action. Okay? So we've got to put action to our love. And as we go, because as we all know, it's easy to take love. It's easy to share love with those who you consider to be your what?
Friends.
Your friend. Who else?
Family.
A family, yeah. It's easy to also share, to give love with maybe a good neighbor, you know. After all, which one of us would not rejoice or weep with our friends and family? And it's easy to live in harmony with a neighbor who is good and kind, and most importantly, just easy to get along with. You know. But what Paul is now calling us as Christians to do, go beyond the safety, the comfort of our church, our friends, our neighbors, our family. He's now calling us to both live out and demonstrate this love to those who we would not put into this list, this group of people. But for Paul, it's simply more than just giving them Christian love. It's about helping them experience God's love through the relationship that we then are willing to give to them. And so beginning there in verse 14, Paul then shares a list of 6 basic guidelines that now call us to go beyond those who are easy to love. So look at verse 14. Right off the bat, first guideline. So when someone persecutes you or seeks to hurt you, We are called in love to do what to them?
Bless them.
To bless them. But more importantly, don't do what?
Curse them.
Curse.
Don't curse. Well, what does that mean, to curse them? The thing is, when we think about this, ask God to bless them. Don't call down curses from heaven to strike them down or anything. Never the old, God's going to get you then. We're not supposed to. Who are the two Samaritans? I'm sorry, the two disciples who wanted to call down. Remember, they wanted Jesus to call down fire. They would do it for him from that Samaritan village. Remember the two brothers, James and John? So they were wanting to call down a curse upon a village because they were rejecting Jesus. And if Jesus wouldn't do it, they'd be happy to do it. See, we should remember whose example of love when he was being persecuted? Jesus' example. Now, is this easy? No. Remember, this is not the easy way to love. Paul is now taking us from that into the hard way to love. But we must remember to follow Christ's example, especially his example from the what? From the cross. Okay? So first off, somebody seeks to persecute you. We are called in Christ to bless them and not curse them back. Second, look at the next verse. We are to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Now, what are the two best ways for a person to bond, to make a connection to another person? Two of the best ways is for you to do what? One of two ways to do something with somebody. One of the best ways is to what? Rejoice. Celebrate with that person. A bond is formed. But there's even a better way. What's one of the best ways to form a bond with somebody? When you not rejoice with them, but when you do what with them? According to this.
Weep with them.
To weep with somebody. Have you ever just cried with somebody? They were hurting. They were in pain. And you let them know that you are what? That you feel for them. That you're there for them. Because, see, these two things show a person what? If you're not willing to rejoice with someone, instead of being jealous, instead of getting angry, but we celebrate their blessings, or something happens and we weep with them, it shows that person what? That you do what for them? That you love them. That you care for them. So first out, secondly, we're to rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Look at the third one, verse 16. Now in verse 16, we are called in love to live in harmony with everyone we meet. That means that we are then to avoid what? All pride. And once again, do not think that you are what? Remember, this and that even goes back to the first one, back in verses 3 through 8. Don't think that you're what?
Better than anybody else.
Better than anybody else. See, we need to remember the yardstick, the measures by which the world judges people. The yardstick, the way the world measures people are not what? Not the way that what? The yardstick or the measurement that the world uses to size up somebody is not the yardstick or the measurement that who uses?
God.
God. And God looks at us. And so the thing is, we're not supposed to be using our humanness. We're supposed to be looking at others through what? Love. The same love that God has for us. And so the thing is, in verse 16 then, live in harmony with everyone that you meet. Avoid being prideful. But now here comes the fourth one. And like I said, they're not getting any easier, are they? Mm-mm. But look at verse 17. Paul here tells us to not do what then?
Evil for evil.
All right, do not repay evil with evil with this. Now, but what do you think is the true focus? I'm trying to combine two words. What is the true focus? What's the real focus of this verse here? For me, it's not necessarily that repaying evil with evil. But look at the last part there. For me, the true focus is found in those words, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. Or in the Greek, it reads, taking forethought for good things before all men. Okay? You see, for Paul, our conduct as Christians should not be only good, it must also what? Our conduct as a Christian should not just be good, it should also what?
Be honorable.
Be honorable. Okay, I like that. Also something else does. Should just be good, it does need to be honorable. It needs to be loving. Basically, it needs to what? It needs to look good. You know? You ever thought about that? Our conduct as a Christian, as far as Paul is concerned, should not just be good. We're not just supposed to, be these things. But we are to reflect who? Christ. Reflect God. It needs to look good. That is why I've always liked this translation. Even though I don't remember what version of the Bible it comes from, and it's something I try to use when I'm out there driving, Jack. I try to remember this version and say myself to this. Do not return evil with evil, but return evil with good, so that others will know who you belong to. I've always liked that version. I think it may be the Message Bible or something like that. But do not return evil with evil, but return evil with good, so that others will know who you belong to. So see, we're not supposed to repay evil with evil. Repay evil with goodness. Because that's who does for us. God does for us. And so that's the fourth one. And that's not getting any easier. Let's look at the fifth one now. Look at verse 18. Now in verse 18, how does Paul call us to live our lives?
Peaceably with all men.
All right, live peaceably with all men, to with all, okay? But now, to live in peace, Paul shares with us what many commentators call are two conditions on how to live peaceably. The first one would be what? Look at that verse 18.
To be yourself, dependent on...
Okay, we'll go back even further than that in verse 18. If it is possible, live peaceably. And then secondly, so far, what now, Mr. David? So far as it
depends on you.
Depends on you. Now see, a lot of commentators want to break this in two. But the truth is, the Greek text doesn't divide it. The Greek text is actually written as one complete thought, not two. And I say it because the way it reads is this. If possible, as far as it depends on you, period. There's a period there in there. So it's not divided up. If possible, as far as it depends on you. You see, Paul is calling us to do everything possible to live this way, to live peaceably with everybody. But Paul also knows. He knows that there are going to be some times in our lives when we as Christians, we just have to take a what?
A stand.
We have to take a stand. We have to take a stand. We need to stand up for what not only we believe, but we also know to be what?
True.
Huh?
True.
True. But not just true, but more importantly, biblically true. See, as Christians, there are times. And there are times when the battle must be fought. Okay? We ought to seek to live peaceably. But there are times when we have to take a stand, especially what we believe in. If we know something to be biblically true. But then that to depend on you. You see, that doesn't mean that you have to go through these times that we have, you take that stand alone. That it depends on you and you alone to do this. God never wants us to do that. He never wants you to stand alone. You see, it is up to you. It's up to all of us to know which of these battles are for who and which ones are for who. First off, which battles are for God and which battles are only for who?
Us.
Us, yourself. Don't let it be your battle, okay? It depends on you to know the difference. To know what it is that we have to take a stand for. Because, that's what's happening today, isn't it? In the life of so many churches, Methodist churches. We're having to, sometimes you have to take a stand, don't you? And just do what you know is right, okay? But now, let's look at the sixth one. In verse 19. We have here basically the simplest, but this is the hardest one of these to do. Because in verse 19, Paul tells us that we are to never then do what?
Avenge.
Seek revenge, or to seek what? Vengeance. Against who? Anyone. Even those that persecute you. Even those that hurt you. Even those that stand against you. We are to never seek vengeance or revenge against someone else. And why? But why should we never seek vengeance against someone?
That's God's job.
Okay, first off, it is God's job. Okay? That's second and most importantly. Vengeance is not our job, it's God's job. But first off, vengeance is the exact opposite of what?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness and what? What are we supposed to be living out here?
Love.
Love. See, vengeance is the exact opposite, first off, of forgiveness. But more importantly, what Paul's talking about is the exact opposite of love. And here's the thing. To stoop down to the level of vengeance actually means that you are then allowing yourself to be what? If you stoop down and you seek vengeance, you want revenge on somebody that has hurt you, then you're actually allowing yourself to be conquered by what?
The devil.
The devil, or by evil itself. Because, like I said, you're being conquered by that. Because to seek vengeance, is that returning evil with goodness? No. That's returning evil with evil, and you are becoming conquered by that evil. And it's in the words, when I read this, I thought about my mom. My mom had her saying, where she said this, she always told us, don't drop down to someone else's level, raise them up to God's level. When we seek vengeance, we're dropping down to their level. But see, our job through love is to raise people up to God's level.
Well, it's hard to do something.
And it is hard to do. Like I said, but now here's the thing. We're going to stop here. We're over 30 minutes. So I want to go ahead and stop before I go any farther. Because next week, we're going to pick up with verse 20. And guess what, Jack? It gets harder. The next section we're going to look at verses 20 and 21. And then going into chapter 13, which I'm going to tell you right now, chapter 13, that's going to end up being Mr. Harold's favorite passage in all of Romans. When you're here next week, you'll hopefully he'll be back next week, back in town, and you'll know by his reaction why it's going to be his favorite one. But the thing is, y'all, it's not going to get any easier. But the thing is, always never forget, Jesus never promised a yellow brick road, y'all. He's always said that there would be division, that there would be heartache. Look at what he went through. And we are called to do the same thing. So anyway, let's stop here. And I encourage you, read those last two verses of chapter 12, and then read especially the first 7 verses of chapter 13. And you'll start getting an understanding why it's going to get even harder. The next step. This leads us into the next step that we're supposed to do. So anyway, thank you for being here with me. And those of you watching us at home, take care. Come back again next week. And until we're together again, goodbye and God bless.
Interesting.